The first time Alina Hayes saw him, she didn't even bother to hide her disapproval. The man stood near the iron gates of her sprawling estate in Westchester County, New York, holding a paint-splattered toolbox in one hand and a worn canvas bag in the other. His clothes looked like they had lived through too many seasons: faded denim, a gray t-shirt with streaks of dried paint, and boots that had clearly seen better days. His dark hair was slightly overgrown, his beard uneven, and yet there was something steady in his posture, something grounded in the way he stood quietly, waiting. Alina, dressed in a tailored ivory suit that matched the polished marble steps behind her, barely glanced at him twice before turning to her assistant with a sharp, dismissive expression. She had built her life on precision, control, and appearances. And this man, this scruffy, out-of-place painter, did not belong anywhere near her world. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Real Single Dad Life. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Alina Hayes had everything that money could buy, but peace had been slipping through her fingers ever since her husband passed away 2 years earlier. The grand estate felt colder now, its echoing halls too large for just her and her 2-year-old son, Oliver. Staff came and went quietly, maintaining the illusion of perfection, but nothing could quiet the constant tension that lived beneath the surface of her life. And Oliver, her sweet, once-laughing boy, had changed too. He cried more often now, loud, uncontrollable tantrums that left even the most experienced nanny helpless. He refused to sleep through the night, waking up in tears that no lullaby could soothe. Doctors had been consulted, therapists recommended, routines adjusted, but nothing seemed to reach him. It was as if he carried a silent storm inside him that no one could calm. That morning had been particularly difficult. Oliver had refused breakfast, throwing his spoon across the dining room, his cries echoing through the high ceilings. Alina, already late for a meeting, had felt her patience snap. Her voice had risen, sharper than she intended, and Oliver's cries had only grown louder in response. By the time she stepped outside, she was already exhausted, her composure barely held together by habit alone. And then she saw him, the painter. "Send him away," she muttered to her assistant without hesitation. "We'll hire someone more professional." The man didn't react immediately, but his eyes flickered for just a second, as if he had expected this. Still, he didn't argue. He simply nodded once calmly and turned slightly as if preparing to leave. But then it happened. From inside the house, Oliver's cries erupted again, louder this time, sharper, cutting through the morning air like a siren. The sound made Alina flinch despite herself. It carried frustration, fear, and something deeper that she couldn't quite name. The painter paused. He turned his head slightly toward the sound, his expression shifting, not with annoyance but with quiet understanding. It was subtle, but it was there. Alina noticed. And for a brief moment, something in her hesitation made her say, "Wait." She didn't know why she said it. Perhaps it was exhaustion. Perhaps it was curiosity. Or perhaps it was something deeper, a flicker of hope she didn't want to admit she still had. The man stepped back toward the gate. "Name?" she asked, her tone still cool but less dismissive. "Caleb Foster," he replied, his voice calm, steady, carrying none of the defensiveness she expected. Alina studied him for a moment longer. He didn't look nervous. He didn't try to impress her. He simply stood there, present. Another cry from inside the house broke the silence. Alina closed her eyes briefly, pressing her fingers against her temple. "You're here to repaint the east wing, correct?" "Yes, ma'am." She hesitated again, then nodded. "Fine, just stay out of the way." Caleb gave a small nod. "I always do." The work began quietly. Caleb moved through the estate with careful efficiency, setting up his materials without disrupting the household. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He didn't linger where he wasn't needed. But he listened. He listened to the footsteps in the hallway, the hushed conversations between staff, and most of all, the cries of a little boy that echoed far too often through a house that was meant to feel like home. By midday, Oliver's tantrums had reached another peak. The nanny, visibly overwhelmed, struggled to calm him in the sunlit living room. Toys were scattered across the floor, untouched, while Oliver cried uncontrollably, his small face red with frustration. Alina stood nearby, her arms crossed tightly, her expression strained. She hated feeling helpless. She hated not having control. And then, unexpectedly, Caleb stepped into the doorway. He didn't rush forward. He didn't interrupt. He simply stood there, observing quietly. Alina noticed immediately. "You're not supposed to be in here." "I know," Caleb said gently. "I just thought maybe I could help." Alina almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "Help? You think you can do what doctors and therapists could?" Caleb didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked at Oliver, not at the chaos, not at the mess, but at the child himself. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I've seen that kind of cry before." Something in his tone made Alina pause. Before she could stop him, Caleb walked slowly into the room. He didn't go straight to Oliver. Instead, he crouched a few feet away, lowering himself to the child's level. He reached into his bag and pulled out something simple, a small sketchpad and a pencil. He didn't speak. He just started drawing. At first, no one noticed. But gradually, Oliver's cries softened, not stopped, but softened, as if something had shifted. His eyes, still wet with tears, flickered toward the quiet scratching sound of pencil on paper. Caleb continued drawing, his movement slow, deliberate. A minute passed. Then another. Oliver's cries turned into small hiccups. His attention was now fully on Caleb. Carefully, Caleb turned the sketchpad around. On the page was a simple drawing, a little boy holding a balloon, standing under a big, wide sky. It wasn't perfect, but it was warm, gentle. Oliver stared at it. And for the first time in days, he stopped crying completely. The room fell into stunned silence. Alina felt her breath catch in her chest. Caleb didn't move closer. He simply placed the sketchpad on the floor between them and waited. After a moment, Oliver crawled forward slowly, his tiny fingers reaching out to touch the page. Caleb gave a small smile. "That's you," he said softly. "And that balloon, it can go anywhere you want." Oliver blinked, his expression shifting from confusion to quiet curiosity. Alina couldn't believe what she was seeing. No one had been able to calm him like this. No one. And yet this man, this painter she had dismissed within seconds, had done it without force, without noise, without anything but patience. From that moment on, something began to change. Caleb continued his work at the estate, but his presence became more than just that of a painter. Without trying to, he became a quiet part of Oliver's world. Each day, he would spend a few minutes drawing simple sketches that told small, gentle stories. A dog chasing butterflies, a boat on a calm lake, a little boy flying a kite. Oliver began to wait for those moments. His tantrums didn't disappear overnight, but they softened, became shorter, less intense. And Alina watched. At first, she kept her distance, observing from doorways, from the top of staircases, from across rooms. She didn't understand it. She didn't trust it. But she couldn't deny it. One afternoon, as sunlight poured through the tall windows of the living room, Alina finally approached Caleb, while Oliver quietly colored one of his drawings nearby. "How?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. Caleb looked up, slightly surprised. "How what?" "How are you doing this?" she pressed. No one else could reach him. Caleb glanced at Oliver before answering. "He's not trying to be difficult," he said gently. "He's trying to be understood." Alina frowned slightly. "That's what every specialist said." "Maybe," Caleb replied. "But sometimes it's not about fixing the child. Sometimes it's about meeting them where they are." Alina didn't respond right away. For the first time in a long time, she felt something unfamiliar, uncertainty. And slowly, that uncertainty began to open the door to something else. Chain. Weeks passed. The East Wing was nearly finished, but something far more important had been restored within those walls. Oliver laughed again. It started small, a giggle here, a smile there, but it grew, day by day. And Alina began to soften. She started sitting in the same room while Caleb drew with Oliver. At first, she said nothing. Then she asked small questions. Then one day, she smiled. It wasn't a grand moment. It was quiet. But it was real. And Caleb noticed. He didn't push. He didn't expect anything. Because he knew something Alina was only beginning to understand. Healing doesn't come from control. It comes from connection. Near the end of the project, as Caleb packed his tools for the final time, Oliver ran to him, clutching a crumpled drawing. It was messy, uneven, but it showed 3 figures holding hands under a bright sky. Caleb knelt down, his eyes soft. "That's beautiful, buddy." Oliver pointed at the figures. "That's you." Caleb's expression shifted, just slightly. Alina watched from a distance, her heart tightening in a way she couldn't explain. That evening, as the sun cast long shadows across the estate, she approached Caleb one last time. "I misjudged you," she said simply. Caleb shook his head. "You didn't know me." Alina hesitated, then added, "But I'd like to." It wasn't just about gratitude anymore. It was something deeper. Respect, trust, and maybe something more. Before we close this story, if it touched your heart in any way, please take a moment to like, share, and comment. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who change our lives the most. And here's something special. Comment below. Kindness always finds a way. Let's see how many people still believe in that. Because in the end, Alina Hayes learned something no amount of wealth could ever teach her. That sometimes, the quietest hearts carry the deepest strength. And sometimes, the person you almost turned away becomes the reason everything begins to heal.